While there is no industry standard for subtitles, the studio and Activision care about the fans' experience, especially with respect to accessibility for people with different abilities, and will evaluate going forward. Activision, responding to complaints about the lack of subtitles for the remastered Spyro trilogy. I have spoken at several events in Australia about accessibility and inclusivity in games on GUI design. It's a personal bugbear of mine, especially when so much of the research is done and the business cases proven. One thing that often comes up is how even though only 40% of the population has some degree of hearing loss, 79% of players use subtitles in games. To hear a major publisher say there's no industry standard for subtitles, that could not be right, could it? So, I decided to see if it really was that hard to make subtitles that do not suck. The FCC's Communications and Video Accessibility Act has a lot of info on requirements for accuracy, and who's legally responsible for subtitles. It states what settings should be available to the user, that these settings to be previewable and saved. It does not say much on what good subtitles look like. So, while it's a standard, it's not really something you could hand to a designer. It's a good starting point. As I kept looking, that's pretty much all I found. Good starting points, but no clear step-by-step instructions for how to make good subtitles. So instead, I went to the companies who already make great subtitles for TV and film. I dug into the resources of the BBC, Channel 4, Netflix, and eventually the United States Electronic Code of Federal Regulations, which contains both legal requirements and the TV industry standard for subtitles. I read through as much public documentation as I could get my hands on. Then I combined all their requirements and recommendations into a single document. Best Practice Subtitles. If you want to write your own subtitles system, this document is the best possible place to start. It seems like a lot of arbitrary rules, but each and every one is important. For example, that 0.60 gap between titles. It completely changes the readability when there's motion on screen. I found not having it there gave me motion sickness when I tried to read the subtitles while the camera moved. I had never experienced motion sickness caused by an non-VR game before this. Taking all that research and turning it into practice was harder than I expected. Unreal Engine's text system is very powerful, but not flexible enough to handle every requirement on that list. For example, the widget is not able to support italic spans within titles yet. Unreal does not support small caps, but it's possible to do with an extra font. This exercise proved to me beyond a doubt that for game engines, providing a robust text framework is a choke point when it comes to making games accessible. The gold standard at this point is full HTML5 support. But looking back at just how good text in Flash was almost a decade ago, it's surprising how far modern engines still have to go to catch up with it. Between the 22nd of November 2018 and the end of January 2019, I spent the equivalent of about 3 weeks worth of full-time work hours, including research, prototyping, coding, and testing. Yellow Submachine is better researched and far more customizable than any subtitles solution you can find online for Unreal or Unity. Here it is in action. Yellow Submachine will be available from the Unreal Marketplace, but for now, you can download it from itch.io here. Subtitles are not just for people who are hard of hearing or deaf. almost 80% of people play with subtitles on. So, what are the things that are not legally required, but that people still want? Here are the 3 main features people asked for. Show the speaker's name. Use color to indicate that character's faction disposition. Show the speaker's emotional state. These are all fairly simple things that are almost always overlooked in game subtitles. If you want to really win over your players, consider adding these options to your dialogue system. They are in yellow subs machine, or read it using only UEFR as blueprints system. I have been told it might be possible to extend the inbuilt text components in C to achieve this. Huge thanks goes to Wintergreen from Impromptu Games for his help and time in optimizing the blueprints for release. As game designers, we often find ourselves having to make decisions quickly. Complex design decisions. How should we face such and such system? Are all these mechanics and features really necessary? What needs to be developed first? Do all these interesting sounding ideas actually fit together? When we get to a fork in the road, and both options sound good, how do we choose one over the other? Having to face these situations often, not being able to provide a concise and clever solution can, unwillingly, to us, lead to 2 types of consequences. Poor design, making design decisions with no solid fundament, a clear criteria, guided only by instinct. A contextless taste usually leads to a design that's limp, with games that end up suffering from feature creep, a heap of features stacked on top of one another. Suffering team, a good portion of the teamwork stands on the decisions made by the creative team, meaning that if you cannot explain those decisions through clear and logical reason, the entire crew will feel as if their work is headed towards random whims and odd chance. That's no good. On the other hand, industry folk, no matter their role, usually show a creative restlessness that drives them to put forward ideas, yearning to have some input. In that context, if we as designers cannot justify why someone's idea is or is not relevant, you can end up on a stage of discomfort undevelopment. Now, there are tools that help us make choices to stay true and not reinvent the wheel over and over. A few of those could be common sense, an understanding of the technical and production aspects, examples of how such problems were solved during other games, and lastly the pure study of game design as an expressing and communicational medium. Common sense. I believe that the craft of game design is largely an exercise in applying common sense. Basic concepts such as trade-off in order to balance experiences, are the difficulty curve in order to create an experience that is not frustrating, etc. All tools that were not discovered through mathematical formulas. That is why so many players might feel that they could certainly design a better game than the one they are playing, since practically anyone can notice what's necessary for an experience to be more or less enjoyable. An understanding of the technical and production aspect. Video games, as products, are extremely hard to create. You have got completely unrelated disciplines that are working together, with all the problems that this scenario implies. There's constraints and conditions everywhere. Time, resources, what technology to use, what platform it will be released on, the team's knowledge and ability, priorities, objectives, etc. And game designers, not exempt from this reality, have to work in this context. You could draw the conclusion that so many constraints end up being disadvantageous for the design, and maybe they are in the long run, but they are at least useful. They are practically an extra tool when it comes to everyday decision making. In a small team, and with a short development cycle, It's rather easy to decide if the game will have 5 characters or 100. There's no way you can do 100. So that's it. The design will have to compromise, and that decision is made thanks to the constraints. It does not take us even 5 seconds to reach that conclusion, and we are all in agreement. Benchmark. Studying how other games solved this, or that design issue, is one of the most basic tools we have got when it comes to tackling complex problems in our own games. Playing an assorted collection of games, and plenty of them, is without a doubt a source of useful knowledge when it comes to understanding the medium with the good and the bad. You do not need to reinvent the wheel, a graphic design teacher used to say, and it's a phrase you can easily apply to any creative space, including game design. The study of games as a medium, books such as Fatigue with Play, Uncertainty in Games, Rules of Play, Game Feel, On the Way to Fun, A Book of Lenses, and the long etc., can provide tools towards understanding the medium, to grasp the anatomy of games in general, and thus being able to design better experiences. They are useful when you are looking to design at a macro level, and when it comes to making decisions at a micro. It's important to understand the quirks, strengths and weaknesses of the medium where we are trying to express ourselves in order to create solid experiences, and to nourish many of the design decisions that we must make every day during development.